Good morning, everybody. Did you guys have a fun night last night? I did. Anybody go out and party?
No.
Anybody go home to sleep?
No.
Anybody do emails? Anybody do all three at the same time? Okay. So I have the pleasure of kicking off our session today with Ifat. We have an amazing panel coming up right after this, and so our goal was just to build a foundation. And so Ifat, just a easy question to get us started. For those that are in the Israeli tech scene, for those that are maybe coming to Israel for the first time, give us a little bit of an introduction. What's going on today in the marketplace?
Wonderful. So good morning, everybody. I think that we can all share an opinion that, things are going well. Some may say, are they going too well? And I want to go through a little bit of, just a little quiet in the room because it's very tough here. There's an echo. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about the recent trends, just to put everybody on the same note. So we are seeing a lot of new things, I think. For example, it's been a while, for those of you who remember in the mid 2000s, where we haven't seen a growing number of Israeli VCs. The very, very beautiful thing that we're seeing now is new groups raising money. So this is a great sign for the ecosystem. This year alone, they've raised about 900 million, and Ellen here is probably going to tell me I'm wrong, because there's all kinds of information that, yeah, I knew it. We'll have him here later. In terms of amounts of investment, so we're seeing a very similar pace in the last sort of year and a half or so, which is about $5 billion a year being invested in Israeli companies. What we are seeing, though, is within those investments, we're seeing less investments in bigger sizes. I don't remember ever a year where we had rounds that are 30, 40, 50, 60 million dollars in companies that are relatively young. So they're around, round B, round C, which is obviously wonderful. In terms of the exit landscape, I don't think I have to say the word Kite Pharma or Neuroderm. These are wonderful. I mean, we're breaking the glass ceilings. We used to think that Waze is a wow, and now now we have, it's not $1 billion, it's beyond $10 billion, and these are wonderful news. By the way, I think Mobileye, which I'm not going to discuss, I think it was discussed enough, but I want to say that Mobileye, from what I'm seeing around the world, actually, not necessarily in Israel, is that it created a whole new outlook on Israel. So everybody knows that Israel is startup nation. People come here, people look for innovation. But I think that the Mobileye exit has created a whole new type of players who knew about Israel, but now are curious about Israel, and I think this is wonderful. I think one of the things that some people are a little worried about globally is something that has to do with the numbers that show us the inflows as opposed to outflows. And what do I mean by that? There is some kind of a way to look at an industry and an ecosystem and say how much money is being invested in companies and how many exits are there, and what does this ratio mean? And if we look in the United States in the last probably 5-6 years, we're seeing a situation where there's a lot of money injected and invested. And because of various trends, which maybe we'll touch upon later, things like unicorns and companies staying private longer and companies raising a lot of money, not needing to go public, sorry, Asaf, and we'll talk about it later, Asaf from NASDAQ. So we're seeing a ratio that is about a half. So half of the money that's being invested, if we look at the absolute number, is being exited. The interesting thing is actually the Israeli market. Not only is it reversed, it's about two times exits to investments every year. This year, just because we had some crazy exits, it's actually getting close to 8 times. And obviously this is not being distributed evenly. But when we look at an industry, the industry makes sense, which is great. I want to close up with two things. One, something that needs to be mentioned is our government. I think the pace of innovation of government helping high tech has increased tremendously. We see this with the Israeli Securities Authority, and we see it with the New Innovation Authority. Every day I open the newspaper, there is another new program that allows private money leveraging government money, and it doesn't matter if you're a small company, large corporate, there is a program for everybody. I think this is very good news. And a little bit of something that relates to us being bankers, a trend that we see in the United States, almost in all later rounds, not all, but in a large percentage of later rounds, we see that equity comes in together with a portion of debt. Different companies have different proportions, and we're starting to see this here. So companies are maturing, raising larger rounds, and actually adopting we need debt as well, because it makes sense, and this is something that works well for us. So I think overall, I think we're in a great status.
That's incredible. So what I'd love to do is get our panel started. And so with that, I'm going to invite the rest of the panel to now join us. I'm going to take my moderator chair over here. Please come on stage. This is a big panel. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We have 3 goals in our panel today. It's a pretty simple goal. We're going to talk about the ecosystem, we're going to share some insights, and we're going to give you guys some actionable advice. We all discussed amongst ourselves and made an agreement. We're going to give fast, interesting answers and make sure that we're high energy but content rich, and we'll do that for 45 minutes. Are you guys ready? That was a tepid response. Are you ready? Yeah. All right, now we're good. Here's what we're going to do for introductions. I'm going to ask everybody to spend 1 minute to introduce yourself, but you get a bonus question. I didn't tell them all my questions. That's my secret, too. Here's your bonus question. With reasonable confidence, what do you think you're the only one on the panel that has seen, done, or experienced? Say that again. Introduce yourself, and with reasonable confidence, what do you think you're the only one on the panel that has seen, done, or experienced?
You always let me go first. I think I'm going to move over there. 10 people on the panel, and I start. My name is Asaf. I'm based in London. I work with NASDAQ. We cover Europe, Middle East, Africa out of the NASDAQ office. My job is to work with companies who are aiming to go public, make sure they come to NASDAQ, and then once they list with us, help them actually maximize the fact that they're a listed company and benefit from everything that is included with being a listed company. And as with regards to your question, I think nobody here spent a night at jail in Las Vegas for driving 135 miles in a sports car. So,
Hi, my name is Alan Feld. I'm the founder and managing partner of Vintage Investment Partners. We're a fund of funds, a secondary fund and late-stage investment group based here in Israel. We invest primarily in Israel, but also in Europe and the US, all focused on venture technology investment. We recently raised our 10th fund, and we manage today about $1.5 billion. Probably only one of the panels got 5 children. Am I? 5 children. Raising 5 children is a lot harder than managing $1.5 billion.
Okay, my name is Ehud Levy. I'm a general partner and co-founder of Canaan Partners Israel. It's an Israeli venture capital fund dedicated to early stage company affiliated with Canaan Partners, a $5 billion fund in the US, and also affiliated with a number of Chinese major strategic players. I think that I'm the only one here on the panel that in the early or the late 70s, where there was no mobile phones, I was the first basically to be involved in mobile advertising. And that's related to the invention of my father, of a billboard to your car, maybe use it as a car shade for your car, and that was the first mobile advertising company in the world.
Hi, my name is Edouard Kukerman. I'm managing partner of Catalyst Fund, which invests in mature technology companies. We have also established in 1993 an investment house which is raising money for Israeli companies, mostly in Europe and in China. Regarding the, I thought speaking about a professional unique thing is the fact that I've taken Israeli companies public in France, Germany, Switzerland, the US, UK, in Germany and Belgium, but because you mentioned the personal stuff, so I think I'm the only one who has a son who played the Davis Cup for Israel.
Ifat, I am running Lumitech. Lumitech is the group, Lumi Group's financial services group for technology companies. We work with about 4,000 Israeli and Israeli-related companies around the world, both obviously in Israel, Palo Alto, New York, and London, and we're starting some stuff in China now. In terms of the only thing that, or some, well, I had kids my own, but no. I think I'm the first, I'm not the only, but I'm the first in Israel to move from VC to banking. I don't know how many more times this will happen, but definitely unique.
You're a brave lady. I'm Moshe Lichtman. I'm co-founder and general partner of Israel Growth Partners. We are a growth fund focused on Israeli-related companies. Growth companies in our dictionary are companies that are selling more than $10 million a year run rate. I'm also a very active angel investor. So between those two activities, I would typically see 400 to 500 companies every year and make 4 to 6 investments every year. In terms of special thing, I'm probably the only one who's built an airplane in this panel. In 2001, I took a sabbatical from Microsoft. I was on Microsoft's management team for many years. Built an airplane, flew it the day after my birthday. That was September 3rd. 8 days later, the skies of the world were closed for a very long period of time because of 9/11.
Hello, my name is Patrick Cron. I've been in the industry for 35 years, running large companies, and fell in the venture capital world quite recently. I'm currently chairman of Truffle Capital, based in Paris. This is a 750 million fund focused on radical innovation, early stage, and we have a kind of a unique position. We just don't invest. We view ourselves also as investors, as entrepreneurs. We have controlling position in the companies. We have a very active interaction with management. We have created 80 companies in 2 fields, biomedtech and fintech, insurtech, big data. We are currently raising, by the way, 350 million. So happy to have Israeli investors in our funds. In terms of unique experience, the most challenging one is trying to learn Hebrew. But another interesting one was that I had the pleasure and the challenge of building a tramway in Jerusalem. And when I met the mayor to discuss with him whether there will be, he asked me what are the challenges. And I said, well, the city is hilly. And he said, no, the city is holy. You have it.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Yair Sneer. I'm with Delta, Managing Director and Vice President with Dell Technologies Capital. We're the ventures arm for the Dell Technologies, that's the company that owns Dell, Dell EMC, Pivotal, RSA, SecureWorks, Boomi, and VisualStream. We're a strategic investor. We have sub-20 companies. We're running here the activity across Europe and Israel. We have sub-20 companies in the region. Since the beginning of the year, we've already made 10 investments, so it's been hectic. And I guess that I might be the only one who got here earlier today in the morning by running.
Hi, good morning, and sorry for being late. I left Ra'anana at 8 o'clock in the morning today. And it took me 1 hour and 45 minutes. So I apologize. My name is Ohad Finkelstein, and I'm a co-founder of Marker that now, on August 6, merged with Innovation Endeavors. We have in our portfolio about 100 companies on the combined portfolio. And we invest in media, video, core IT, applications and everything that actually is interesting. We don't invest in life science, bio, because that's not our core competency.
Well, I'd asked everybody to say something that you think is unique about yourself on the panel. So if you can answer that, and then we'll begin the session. I know. One fact that you think makes you perhaps individually unique than others on the panel.
I'm better looking. Right. I'm also an advisor to the board of Coca-Cola, the International Board of Coca-Cola. I'm an advisor to the International Board of Walmart, officially, and I'm also sitting on the board of one of the biggest satellite games in the world today. I'm an independent board member on a company called OneWeb, and that you may have heard of, and some other stuff as well.
Perfect, great. So here's what we're gonna do next. I hate boring panels. Do you guys agree? Yeah. We're gonna begin something we're calling a round of hard questions. I've prepared an individual hard question for each of you. About a minute each. Awad, we begin with you. Are you ready? It's uncommon for venture capital firms to merge. Can you describe what made your merger unique, and will this create a trend with other venture firms also merging?
Right. Is that a hard question?
It's an easy hard question. They get harder as they come back.
So, it's a question about how do you court, I guess, and what's happened in reality. For a long, long time, the past 4 or 5 years, we've been working with innovation in many, many ways. A lot of the companies that came to see us as marker were too early for us to invest, and so we referred them to innovation. And innovation groomed them, so to speak, invested and groomed them until they were good enough for us in terms of their size. So if you walk like a duck and you quack like a duck, and eventually one day you wake up to smell the coffee, so to speak, and say, okay, we are working together as one unit for so long. How about looking if 1 and 1 make 3? And let's just merge everything together and have a very early stage and have a round A or B stage fund in the same fund. And that's what happened. My partner Yuval, whom I'm sure you guys know here, was on the boat, dancing on both funds for a long time, and it was just a natural thing to do. I'm not sure that this is a trend. It just was fitting us.
I respect that answer. Here for you. Accepting strategic investment from a company like Dell can have some downsides. Can you be honest in sharing with this group a few reasons maybe why they wouldn't want to accept your money?
Yeah, so there's always the risk of companies afraid of being colored, I'd say, with the identity of the investing company. And it's also part of the challenge. I mean, there's an inherent potential conflict of interest being a strategic investor. You always need to make sure, at least that's what we're doing, that we're putting the company in front. By the way, there's always that conflict of interest even if you're a standard VC. I mean, whether you put first your money or what's best for the company. So we're putting the companies first. There's also the concern on the company side that, hey, if we're going to take money from that, usually these are large players, those strategic investors, there's a risk, potential risk, that we would need now to follow their roadmap and do whatever they're asking us to do. And obviously, it's not the case. Otherwise, we would have not been able to invest so much. There are multiple corporate VCs now. I mean, we have a joke internally with the team that's it's a matter of time for Chipotle to announce their ventures arm. Our challenge is constantly creating meaningful value for the company. We, on the spectrum of, you have those corporate VCs that are more ROI driven versus who are more strategically driven. We're being an outlier of being strategic, meaning that we would always be investing in companies that we obviously believe in, but at the same time, there's a clear path which is mutually agreed as to what we're going to do together. It can happen within a month, within a year, within 3 years, whenever it's supposed to happen. It might not happen eventually because reality changes, but at least when we do the investment, there is a plan in place. There is someone across the company, across the various BUs, business units, that is committed to making sure that it happens.
Thank you for that. Patrick, a question for you. I would say traditionally France does not have the reputation for being the most innovative or cutting edge country. 35 or 40-hour day, work week, et cetera, et cetera. Recently, though, there's a big push from your government and other sectors. How are we supposed to reconcile what I'd call my mind view of France to what the branding people are telling me I should now think of the new France?
First, I think the perception is important. The reality may be slightly different. Indeed, there are a number of regulations which are not very business-friendly, typically labor-related regulations, with, by the way, the new government has just initiated a very fundamental change. But it hasn't been any problem for the startups because, as you know, they don't respect labor regulations, so they basically don't care about these. I would say the ecosystem in France is quite favorable for startups in terms of ecosystem itself, in terms of relationship with universities, in terms of quality of engineers you get, in terms also of subsidized and tax system, which is basically supporting innovation. So our fund is investing in Europe. 70% of the investment we have been doing have been in France. We have had very good exits. We have very good development, a limited number of failures as well. So I would say if my son was looking for a startup, I would suggest that he tries in France, and if not, goes elsewhere.
Thank you for that answer. Moshe, you're unique in the sense of that you focus on private equity. I think the majority of Israel is thought of as a venture capital, early stage ecosystem, yet you and a few of your peers look at much later stage. Are there enough opportunities to warrant a dedicated investment fund for beyond the early stage, which Israel is so known for?
Yeah, I think, when Chaim Shani, who is the co-founder with me of IGP, and I started to look at it in 2012, a lot of people raised their eyebrows regarding a growth model in Israel. It's known as Startup Nation. I know that, startup dynamic very personally. Both Chaim and I came from building and running very large businesses, and so we are actually curious why the law of large numbers was not working in Israel. There were 7,000 startups, 1,400 we heard yesterday that get started every year and funded. Even 0.5% of that would make for some nice large companies that would come out of that. So we started actually going and meeting with what we thought were growth companies. And we met with over 100 companies over a period of a year and realized that there was a change underway. And actually, if you look 5 years later, there are actually a lot of new growth funds and a lot of VCs who are doing growth investments. So I think we have seen that trend actually materializing, and you see the maturation of the ecosystem here. I think if you go to quite a few entrepreneurs today who are raising funds, they're actually, their intent is to build large businesses. I think Amnon Shashua is a unique phenomenon in that sense, but there are a lot of other entrepreneurs that are not willing to get bought for 40, 50, 100, 150 million, and that's the type of crowd that we're looking for.
Thank you for that. Ifat, we had a great opening session where we talked about some of the good. Let's be real for this group, and I know that you're a real person, you love talking about the truth. What are some of the downsides or some of the risks currently going on in the Israeli ecosystem?
I don't know if it's a huge risk, but I think that we're at a stage in our lifetime as an Israeli economy where companies are moving, like Moshe said, from selling themselves early to selling or never selling and staying private and hopefully going public. And in the transition period, we're seeing a little bit of a desert in terms of exits, because it takes a while for those mature ones to, sort of get public, et cetera. So the only thing I would be a little worried about is that all these funds that have raised money now and are investing in early stage, it will be a while until they sort of exit their positions. I do think we have mitigating factors. Some of them are sitting on this panel. There are all kinds of secondary funds and other means where VCs can actually, or later stage or buyouts where VCs can actually get out of the position, but not touching the company situation and allowing them to stay private and get bigger and bigger.
Thank you for that. Edward, we talked a little bit earlier around your personal transition from being more European-focused to now more Chinese-focused. But I think it is a healthy debate in Israel, the influence and the role of the Chinese, Chinese money, Chinese government, Chinese corporations. So I'm kind of curious, what advice would you have if a Israeli entrepreneur was considering Chinese money? What trade-offs might they need to be aware of that from your experience you can advise them on?
No, it's a good question because there is more and more Chinese money in Israel. In the last 5 years, there have been $5 billion invested by Chinese companies, and little by little, they're taking a leading role in terms of investments in Israel and also in the venture capital industry. In our last fund, the majority of our LPs are from China, and it's a growing trend. Now, there are a lot of preconceived ideas about Chinese money in Israel. We have seen that when there was a debate when Tnuva was bought by a Chinese group. Before, it was not a problem for the Israelis. When a British group bought Tnuva, and as we say in Hebrew, they took all the milk out of it. But while there is a Chinese group coming in, I think that there is, as many years, venture capital funds have been backed by Americans. For many years, it was very difficult for them to accept European money or to go public in Europe, and we have tried to promote Europe for many years. And when we speak about Chinese money today, I feel again that there are a lot of venture funds with a lot of preconceived ideas, while the Chinese market is a huge opportunity for Israeli companies. And I don't think it's a bad thing for the Israeli market to have access to the China market for the Israeli companies. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So Ehud, you were the first institutional investor in Waze, which on one hand I'm sure is a badge of honor, but on the other probably puts a lot of pressure on you. People are always going to say, what's the next Waze? What's the next Waze? What's the next Waze? How do you actually go about your day-to-day constantly feeling perhaps the burden of finding that next big unicorn investment?
We already found that. Well, we have a number of those. in the process. No, actually, there is no, I don't feel any burden on that. We just, keep our head down and just screen, close to 1,000 opportunities every year. Try to select the good ones. We definitely see a change in the market that companies that rather believe in developing only like the core technologies, looking at verticals and develop specific solutions for specific verticals. We see a big trend of companies that are targeting, I would say, traditional industries. We see that starting. Of course, everyone mentioned Mobileye, so I must also mention that. And also Waze was in that industry as well, that the automotive industry, that the VC was out of there. And we see that coming into from insurance to agriculture to supply chain management. Every sector, traditional sector is now being changed by the technology, and that's what we are looking. We're always looking for the new trends. That's what we did what I did with Waze, looking, for using the GPS. There was only one phone model with GPS embedded inside, and that's what we're looking for, the next, not only big market, but fast-growing one.
Alan, you're obviously a veteran of the high-tech industry here. 22 years, is that 22 years? A lot's changed in the world and a lot's changed in Israel. As a fund-to-fund, though, today, or more accurately, as an investor today, why should I consider giving my money to Vintage versus picking two funds that are great, being a two LP, and accumulating somewhat of an index that way versus your kind of fund-to-fund approach?
So, look, we're not an index. You hear me? Yeah. So we're not an index. I think the challenge with venture is the gap between the top decile venture funds globally and the rest of the funds is enormous. It's not like in the public markets where the gaps can be a few percentage points. It's the difference between making significant money and in fact losing money. So the biggest challenge is, you're giving somebody a blank check, and it requires an enormous amount of work. Funds typically raise money every 3-4 years, but the period it takes for a company to be realized could take 10, 15 years. We have some funds that are old enough to drive a car, and we probably have a couple that are about to become, ready to go into the Israeli army in age. It takes a long time to see realizations. But you've got to make that decision within 3-4 years. So the only way really to do this effectively is to get to know their portfolio, to get to know the underlying companies, to make an assessment that this is going to be a good return. Second, one of the other big challenges with venture, if you look again historically, is attribution. Which partners did what? Again, that timetable that I mentioned, people get older, they may not necessarily stay longer term. Identifying who the really good people within the manager and making sure that there's going to be a process for succession within the manager is crucial. So, you know, most people will take the financial statements of the fund and say, oh yeah, they did well, you know, in one or two funds, and then say, okay, it's going to be great in the third. That's not necessarily the case. Like everything else in life, you got to do the legwork. And so we have 30 people, and all we do is look at funds and look at companies, and we're doing that legwork, and we're only doing venture because we can't do that and that and that and that, because it just, there's a lot of work to do it. So that's our case.
Asaf, I assume all great Israeli companies should go public on the NASDAQ. Do you agree? That's not my question, by the way.
The answer is no.
Okay, good. Well, that's so. On occasion, I'm sure certain companies decide to go public on other markets or perhaps seek alternatives. What's a compelling reason why maybe they shouldn't go public on the NASDAQ and perhaps look at another outcome?
As in listing on another exchange or doing something else? That's a difficult question. I mean, going public is one step in the company's life. So this is part of the strategy of the company. It comes to serve certain targets and provide the company with certain assets which will allow it to grow. Some companies simply don't need the exposure, they don't need the visibility, they have constant access to how much money they need, and therefore they can act in a much more flexible way as they grow the business. So going public brings with it a lot of responsibility, transparency, compliance, regulatory burden, and cost, but it also brings you a lot of benefits. So ultimately, the analysis is a cost-benefit analysis, and for some company, you know, it would dictate that the company could stay private for a long time.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to drop into trends and insights now, and I'm going to begin with a little bit of sector analysis. And so, Yair, I'm looking to you first. AI, IoT, robotics, we hear a lot about that. Briefly, share with the audience, what do you think is kind of one or two major focus areas going on in Israel? How does Dell view it? And then we'll ask a couple folks related questions on that.
So it's a great question. So definitely AI now there's a big hype around it. Everyone talks AI, everyone does AI, everyone thinks AI, everyone sleeps AI, so it's all over. Realistically, the reason that it became so popular in recent, let's say roughly 2 years, is the fact that currently there's a strong enough hardware that can enable it. So the algorithmic stuff is not that new. It was there for at least 30 years. So a trend associated with it, which is quite relevant also to the Israeli ecosystem, is that we're seeing dedicated hardware, silicon chips for deep neural networks and stuff like that. So definitely that's a focal domain for us that we've made an investment. Actually, our investment is in the UK in a company called GraphCore, but there are also a few companies in Israel doing that. So it is evolving to become more and more relevant as sort of as a competitive alternative for NVIDIA. Except for that, with regards to IoT, the trends that we're seeing is sort of acknowledgement and understanding that there's as much that you can do from the gateway, and hence you also need to do things on the edge points. And then we're seeing distributed compute, distributed storage, distributed capabilities that would be complementary to what's going on from the gateway, and obviously that's another domain that we're focused on.
Thank you for that. Ehud, a follow-up question building on that for a moment. As a financial investor, how do you perhaps look differently at some of the same challenges that he just mentioned that Dell might look at strategically?
Well, I think, and you like us. Okay. You wanted us to say a statement, so I think that AI will become a commodity in a few years. We see like the major platform providers in the world basically provide this as a service. So what we will see in the next few years is that the AI will be implemented in the different vertical. So you'll be specialized in specific vertical, and you will leverage on this generic platform. So I think that companies develop only the core technology for AI is not the right thing. And I think that AI will become really a commodity to use, and people will provide solution and will learn how to provide as a service to the customer in the specific verticals. And that's what, if you look at the Amazon, not only are there AI solutions, but the vertical of like building Alexa, which is a great example for that, that this is, something that really tailored and people are using it like every day and in their daily life.
Thank you. Edward, similar question to you. So as you think of either a European or a Chinese perspective, how do they see these trends perhaps differently than the local Israeli market might view them?
I think that the European and Chinese have probably a different perspective. They look at, for the Chinese, a huge market that they have, and they need innovation in order for the Chinese company to become more competitive. And what the Israeli can bring them is technology that will enable them to become not only leader in China, but worldwide market leader. One comment on the AI, because we have invested in Mobileye, and I think what is interesting in your comment is the fact that in terms of vertical, we see the society evolving, and one of the things which will be very interesting is the fact that the people will live longer. Some people will reach the age of Moïse, and maybe some Metushelach over the years. And what will be the obstacle, the bottleneck will be probably the ability for the elderly people to keep their brain and to be functional. And AI can have a huge contribution for that. We see even for Mobileye, for the elderly people, having autonomous vehicle would be part of the solution. So I think there is a huge trend, which is how AI could be applied to medical device and to the brain.
Thank you for that. Moshe, does it worry you that some of these hot, sexy companies might get acquired by, say, Microsoft, your former employer, before you have a chance to come in on kind of a later stage?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one just to refer to what people have talked about, what you typically see in Europe or in China are B2C companies, because these are large markets, or service or tech-enabled services companies. In the United States, it's a very diverse market. You see everything. In Israel, because it's such a small market, you typically see a lot of B2B niche type companies that are focusing on very hard problems or very complex technologies. And I think that, two areas that were already mentioned, that's hypercomputing and AI and automotive. Those are areas where we see a lot of acquisition, a lot of M&A activity. Cyber is a third area. And one of my frustrations, I'm a big investor as an angel in cyber companies, and they get bought, but they all get bought before they get to escape velocity. And for IGP, that's a problem. So I think that's definitely an issue.
Ohad, you mentioned in your introduction, that's better now, it's louder, huh? You mentioned in your introduction that part of the rationale for the merger was to be multi-stage. Do you have a competitive advantage where you might see opportunities early, mid, late, and be able to deploy capital at those various instances?
Well, it has nothing to do with the merger. We see, the parade of companies that we see every day is amazing. And it has to do, I guess, with hopefully good reputation and the fact that people need money, and we are one of the sources of the many respectable sources around here on the stage. So I don't know that this is because of the merger or not. It's just because people know us and they come to us, and we have more than our share, and some of them are really brilliant. But I want, in your permission, to address the, when young people come to me, or younger, I should say, people come to me and ask me, what should I do and what kind of, where should I go in terms of finding a job and a purpose in life? I tell them that if they want security, job security, they should stay with cyber. Because the combination of bad people and smart people is growing exponentially, and it will continue to grow, and evil and smart is here to stay. If you want to do something trendy, go to the automotive industry. It's going through a major revolution, and it's trendy, and it's nice, and it's interesting. If you want to deal with the future, everything with the big data, data analytics, predictives, data predictives, and so on, because this is really the new Everest. This is the new frontier. It's going to change our lives in many ways that we can't even begin to understand. And we are standing in front of the Everest in terms of the information we have in front of us, and we don't even have a slight rope to start climbing this huge Everest.
Thank you for that. Alan, as we talked a little bit about some of the funds here, do you think there's a competitive advantage when you look at them being either stage or sector specific? Do you have advice for perhaps a new or first-time fund opportunity that might be created in the Israeli market? Do you see any gaps?
Technology is, well, by definition, companies are global. We don't have a domestic market, so you've got to look at where the opportunities are by, right from the beginning, globally. So every company that's created here is competing with companies elsewhere. We have a tendency in this country sometimes to do exactly the same thing that they do in the Silicon Valley, instead of saying, where do we have a competitive edge, and then focus on that. As an investor who invests also, in U.S. venture funds, European venture funds, and Israeli venture funds, I want each one of my investors in those markets to focus on where that country has a competitive advantage. The good news and the bad news. The good news is obviously our R&D spending that's connected to military is gigantic. The bad news is we're badly underfunding our university research. And so not surprisingly, the stuff that is really attractive here ends up coming from where the R&D budgets are. And at the end of the day, that's an area that we have to continue to support. One other area, has been, and some of the people here have heard this as a broken record. Moshe and I were talking about this morning, but a monkey throwing a dart on a wall in the last 20 years has gotten a 3x on a semiconductor investment here, and you can't raise a dollar today for semiconductor companies. Why? Because in the Valley, people don't want to do anything that's, a lot of people don't want to do stuff that's hardware related. Well, I got to tell you something. When you invest in a SaaS company, we got a bunch of SaaS companies, and fortunately, several of them are doing well. You're financing your customers. So this idea that somehow software companies are cheaper to build than hardware companies in a SaaS world isn't always that true. And so again, I think we got to look at where we've got good, strong core advantages, focus on that, and not necessarily do exactly the same thing they're doing in Palo Alto.
Thank you for that. Ifat, as a banker, how do you look at this world a little bit different? What do you guys see as your opportunities in terms of capitalizing on some of these trends?
The nice thing about us is we want everybody to be our client. So we like the semis, and we like the SaaS, and we like everybody. But the one little thing that we're maybe a little different about is the way that we look at companies that service us. This goes back to both, the storage and the hardware parts, but more so in things that could theoretically change the way we provide banking. And I think just like, the hotel industry went through disruption and the taxi industry went through disruption, banking is going to be completely different. I agree with Ohad that data science is huge. Part of the problem is how do we take all the data in our organization that's spread all over the place and be able to extract it and get things that we can actually act on at real time. And this is, I think, a huge revolution. And I can tell you a lot of the times when we look at companies we lend to, we bring them to the bank and we see what we get excited about, and it helps a lot. So.
Thank you for that. Patrick, in early stage technology companies, I think people often look at the tech, the intellectual property, et cetera, but sometimes they neglect management and management skills. At what point does management become critical versus technology?
Well, very good point indeed. As far as we're concerned, I said we are quite European, but we basically source worldwide, and we are looking at strong intellectual property and obviously global disruptive technology and end markets. At the end of the day, what we found is that a great guy with a great innovation is not enough to make a startup successful. At what point in time, you need a sales guy, you need a developer, you need a guy who knows the regulations and the way to go through the regulation, may even need a CFO to go to crazy edges. So what we try to do in the way we interact with this startup and the kind of hands-on interaction that we have is really the ability to provide them what they need at one point in time. We have been the core investor in a company called Carmat, which is artificial heart, which has been developed by a fantastic surgeon. But at one point in time, we needed, I would say, a professional manager, the guy who was running the cardiology business in Abbott, and I joined the company. So what we have been trying to do in the interaction with these startups is provide them the necessary support. Another point, I was being quite new in this world, I was shocked by the time the CEOs of these startups are spending, I want to say wasting, in trying to look for money. And as a core investors with them, we help them doing so as well. We've had them focus on technology and markets, and we take care with them of the money.
Thank you for that. So Asaf, last question in this round, coming back to you now. We talked a little bit about the life cycle, and so there's a question on early versus later stage. I think you said something prescient where going public on the NASDAQ is not the end of the journey, but rather a midpoint. Talk a little bit about what happens once you go public. Certain firms or investors might think, yay, we're done, we're public, but in many ways that actually might just be the beginning of the next phase of their life.
It is. No, but again, I think it comes down to the company and the management, as you mentioned. Once you're a public company, you have, as I said, much more visibility. You get a validation from the market. You can use your shares as acquisition currency. So companies, if they build the right strategy and use the IPO event correctly, can then leverage that and continue to grow their business. So again, IPO is just another way of taking the company to the next stage, and to connect it to what was said here previously, this is why we see Israeli companies who actually went public, like Mobileye, which we've mentioned before, getting to those, sizes and the global visibility and the ability to really become market leaders, because they have all these assets under them and they can leverage it for future growth.
Perfect, thank you. So we're now going to get into what we call the lightning round. Are you guys ready for the lightning round? Can I get a little drum roll? That's your drum roll. All right, lightning round. Odd, you ready? You need a microphone. I'm going to start a sentence. You need to finish it. Very short, very quick answers. Are you ready?
No.
Are you ready?
Well, yes.
You're still not ready. Are you? Okay, ready. The next big thing is?
Data.
Move the microphone. The best part of being on board is?
Working with entrepreneurs.
My mother.
Great lady.
Thank you. You know my mother? It bothers me when?
An entrepreneur doesn't have the facts right.
I wish I knew that.
Wow. No, I would be here if I knew everything back, looking back. No changes.
Yossi Vardi is?
A great entrepreneur and a communicator.
It bothers me when?
When I don't feel comfortable with respect to the homework that entrepreneurs did when they come to see us.
Global corporations always?
Sell their venture portfolio at the bottom of the market and invest at the height of the market.
Israeli chutzpah can?
Get you in a lot of trouble.
All right, we're going to swing back one more time so you get a second question. Are you ready? My father.
Can drive me crazy sometimes, but I love him very much.
It's trendy to look. It's trendy to look for.
Everything that's being done in Palo Alto.
People who co-invest with me
Are trustworthy.
Say that again?
Trustworthy.
That's very nice. When the robots take over our jobs, we must
Retire.
DLD is the best because
The people are wonderful.
that's you guys. Round of applause. Moshe, once upon a time,
There was a little boy that dreamed to be an astronaut and became an investor.
Patrick, the worst part of being on a board.
The worst part of?
Of being on a board.
Take decisions.
Make decisions. Yair, why are there no more women on this panel? why are there not more women on this panel?
Because they were not invited?
Alan, why are there not more women on this panel?
Because we don't have enough women in the industry, and we better get to work and make sure that happens.
Yifat, why don't we have more women on this panel? We need more women on this panel. Last but not least on the lightning rounds. I'm doing a good job as a moderator, maybe?
You are trying at least.
I'm trying, okay. I would have said I prepared, but same version of that. Okay, good lightning round, right? That was fun. So we're getting close to our time, so we're gonna end with the following. I asked, and hopefully you guys did a little bit of homework. We're gonna swing one more time back around to me, a prediction. So as the audience thinks about growth in the future, if you can all briefly, please share something that you think is exciting, new, or novel coming up in the next few years.
Say it again?
A prediction.
Yeah. For what?
You didn't do your homework.
Well, two things. One, I predict that autonomous cars are not coming to a theater in your neighborhood anytime soon, in spite of the hype. And the second thing, I predict that innovation, virtual reality and augmented reality and so on will get to the end of the globe and will provide distance learning and distance medicine, and the world will be a better place.
I think that in the coming years, traditional science like chemistry, physics, and stuff, and traditional math would come into action. We're seeing new companies building new stuff and new materials. We're seeing new analog devices built by physics experts for IoT. So that would emerge and become more and more common.
Well, first, I think the future is more difficult to predict than the past, so your question is tough. Secondly, I think we should be modest. Think that 15 years ago, who would have said that there will be new cruise ship built to cross the ocean and no more supersonic flights because the Concorde would have been discontinued? No one. So in terms of prediction, I think that healthcare is going to go through fantastic changes. Surgery already today is imaging, robotics, and connected implants. So the data processing, etc., will make big changes. Second, I think that the areas which are currently being regulated, still being regulated, regulations are going to burst, and there will be the same opportunities as the one we have seen, for instance, in the telecom industry over the last 10 years.
Well, two things I'm passionate about I think are going to materialize in the next 10 years. First one is space travel. I think there's never been a period where so many billionaires were building so many spaceships. So I think that's one. And the other thing is, just to follow on, I think personalized medicine, cure for cancer, all built on machine learning and big data are coming to fruition, I think, over the next decade.
So I'll talk about something that touches me personally. I get a lot of predictions of people telling me that I won't have an employer because banks are going to disappear. And it's an interesting assumption, but one of the things we're noticing is that, banking is going to stay. That's what I think. It's going to be better, more personalized, smarter, more digital. Thanks.
We spoke about many types of technologies. I think what is interesting is the technology that are applied to two populations, the millennium generation, but also the elderly people, and those will be the winners.
My prediction is that in a few years' time, we will not have a DLD situation where you meet many people and you don't recognize them, because immediately you have something that will identify the people. And my prediction for next year, that we will have at least as interesting panel with you here on stage.
My prediction is that everybody else will continue to take the predictions that I actually wanted to say. Prediction one, the technology for autonomous driving will be way ahead of the regulators and who's going to be paying for the infrastructure, and that's going to be the problem in making autonomous driving happen. Second, there's going to be massive consolidation in the SaaS space. Just like people used to be concerned about having too many client-server applications. I'm going back, 16, 17 years, people are going to say, wait a minute, I got tens, if not hundreds of SaaS applications, and there's going to be huge consolidation in the space. Same thing in the security space. There's about over 600 companies in Israel. It's going to start being aggregated into full solutions. And here's a prediction I'm not sure about, but I really wish it happens, that the startup industry becomes far more diverse than a bunch of white guys.
I think that in the next 10 years, we'll start seeing major changes in the educational system. So all those ed tech companies coming in, creating personalized educational program for kids using artificial intelligence, big data, etc. If that would happen, that could be, I think, the next great revolution and what will actually take mankind to the next step, because then people will actually be able to manifest their full potential.
Thank you. So I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative and end with a quick story for you guys. My firm recently did an event in Brooklyn, and it involved people that were formerly incarcerated, basically people that spend time in prison. And the third speaker gets up and he gets introduced as someone who spent 20 years in prison for a robbery when he was young. And so the speaker gets up and he says, "Close your eyes." And he says, "No, really, close your eyes. I'm not going to rob you." So we're going to actually do this. Are you guys ready? I invite my panel. Please close your eyes. I invite you in the audience. Please close your eyes. Think of the worst thing you've ever done. Open your eyes. Imagine that everyone in this room knew only that about you, and that's all they would ever know about you. And to me, it really hit me, and it hit me in a very special way. And the advice I want everyone to, in this room, think about is, you might see someone and know one thing about them, but that's not who they are as a person. That's not necessarily all there is to know about them. DLD is about communities and it's about people. Business is about people. And so if that one little piece of advice helps, and I ask of you, get to see something behind someone's business card. If you know them for one thing, just realize at the end of the day, we're all people. And so with that, I'd love to give a big round of applause to our panel. They were incredible. I'd love to give a big round of applause to Ruti, Orly, Oscar Forby. You guys are amazing.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Of course, to Yossi Vardy. And then one last announcement. Right after this, we have an amazing keynote. My good friend, Zach Westfield at Microsoft. He's going to be talking about growth in the age of disruption. It's going to be wonderful. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much.
And thank you, Ziv Klein. He did a marvelous job with an incredible panel. Thank you so much.